Welcome to the weekly update. Israel and Christians Today, bringing you biblical understanding about world events concerning Israel and the Jewish people. It's Friday, the 27th of June, 2025. What an amazing week we have had. Looking back over the past week, we're going to talk about the war between Israel and Iran. We're going to talk about developments in the Gaza Strip, and we're going to talk about what all of this means for the region. So let's kick off. Within only 12 days, commencing 2 weeks ago on the 13th of June, in a highly sophisticated and complex operation that was truly biblical, both in its scope and effect, Israel succeeded to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. For decades, the Iranian revolutionary regime had been working on creating the ability to produce a nuclear bomb that would potentially be directed against Israel. Ever since President Obama, the Americans have been trying to negotiate together with the international community, with the Iranians, to prevent or at least to postpone this nuclear operation without success. And following a dramatic statement by the International Atomic Energy Agency on the 12th of June, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion in the very early hours of the 13th of June. And in those first hours, Israel took out Iran's air force and air defenses and killed a significant number of key Iranian military, as well as leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and nuclear scientists. All of this highly coordinated and precisely timed to the last minute. In the succeeding days, Israeli fighter jets and drones swept Iranian airspace, of which they had complete control, destroying many installations connected with the nuclear program and wiping out most of Iran's ballistic missiles and launches. The most significant military leader killed was the chief of the IRGC Air Force, Brigadier General Amir Ali Haji Zadeh, who was killed alongside the rest of the top brass of the IRGC Aerospace Force, all of them responsible for Iran's ballistic missiles and drones, as they met in an underground command center to prepare Iran's retaliation. Operation Rising Lion involved not only the Israeli Defense Forces and security, but also a large number of Israeli operatives and Iranians who cooperated with Israel in Iran. The whole operation had been in preparation in secret for years, and of course things intensified over the past months as Israel anticipated that the moment would come where they would have to actually go into Iran to take out this nuclear program. The campaign reached its peak last weekend when suddenly, dramatically, within just a few hours, United States B-2 bombers, in an extraordinary operation, suddenly performed a surgical operation, dropping the massive bunker buster bombs, as they're known, to destroy Iran's Fordo uranium enrichment plant that is buried deep underground south of Tehran in the mountains. Simultaneously, nuclear submarines stationed just outside the Persian Gulf fired 30 Tomahawk missiles at the already damaged nuclear facilities of Natanz and Isfahan to finish their destruction. Well, just a word about these bunker buster bombs, as they're known. The one used by the US was the GBU-57 series Massive Ordnance Penetrator, MOP. This is a 30,000 pound or 14,000 kilogram, 20.5 feet long or 6.2 meters, precision-guided missile that was developed by Boeing for the US Air Force. Due to its size and weight, this GBU-57 MOP can only be carried by the Northrop B-2 Spirit strategic bomber. an amazing looking aircraft. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the devastating US strike on Fordo destroyed the strike's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility inoperable. IAEA said, "We assess that the American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, combined with Israeli strikes on other elements of Iran's military nuclear program, have set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons by many years." Now, while claiming victory, Israel has paid a huge price for this war. Over the past days, Iran has intensively attacked Israeli civilian areas with ballistic missiles, causing massive damage. 29 people were killed and over 3,000 wounded. The country has been in an effective lockdown. The war cost tens of billions of shekels. 15,000 Israelis were forced to evacuate their homes, and hundreds face a housing crisis. On Monday, President Trump suddenly announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, apparently brokered by Qatar in close coordination with China. Both Israel and Iran breached the first hours of the ceasefire. Israel rained bombs on key Iranian installations, and Iran continued to pour missiles on Israeli civilians. Tragically, after the announcement of the ceasefire, an Iranian missile struck a building in Beersheba early Tuesday morning, killing a young IDF soldier, his mother and partner. Corporal Eitan Zaks, only 18, from Beersheba, was in combat training. His mother, Michal Zaks, was also killed, as well as Eitan's beautiful young partner, Noah Baguslavsky from Arad. 2 others were killed in the missile attack. 20 were injured as Iran fired 3 rounds of missiles into Beersheba around 7 a.m., even after the time the ceasefire was intended to begin. All of this means that for the time being, his hostilities between Israel and Iran have ceased. Well, there's hostility still there, but there is no military fighting, and the war is certainly not over. The Iranian revolutionary regime under the Ayatollah Khamenei is still in power. The Ayatollah himself is still alive and kicking. He will have emerged now from the bunker in which he has been hiding for the past 2 weeks. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been badly damaged during this operation, but also through previous operations, but has definitely not been destroyed. And furthermore, much of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium may already have been spirited out of the Fordo, Isfahan and Natanz sites even before they were bombed. And nobody knows where that uranium is and how much there is. And some of it could be used to build so-called dirty bombs. President Trump has called for renewed negotiations with the Iranian regime to reach a conclusive deal to end Iran's nuclear program. So far, the Iranians have refused the offer, and in fact, Ayatollah Khamenei has claimed victory in this war. Absurdly, he said that the US President Trump had exaggerated the impact of strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and threatened to repeat the slap that his country had dealt American forces in the region. The regime has declared its determination to rebuild the nuclear program. Israel, in its turn, has said it achieved all of its military objectives but will strike Iran again if necessary. So turning now to the Gaza Strip, Israel's victory in the Iran war has dealt a severe blow to Hamas that is hugely dependent in the Gaza Strip on Iranian financial and military support, especially through the IRGC. And of course, not just in the Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. But the war against Hamas is far from over. Hamas has been decimated by the IDF, but is reorganizing itself. Young people are being recruited to fight for Hamas, and terrorist operatives from the organization continue to seize aid trucks and transfer them directly to warehouses under their control. There's an acute shortage of food and other basic supplies in the Gaza Strip after the almost two-year military campaign by Israel since the 7th of October 2023. Has displaced most of Gaza's 2.3 million inhabitants. Hamas continues to hold 50 Israeli hostages, some of them still alive. Foreign aid in Gaza is being distributed by the US-Israeli entity Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. An average of just 56 trucks have been entering Gaza per day since Israel partially lifted its blockade in May after 78 days. The UN says several hundred trucks are needed daily to address the dire need in the Strip. This is controversial. There are apparently huge stockpiles of humanitarian aid that Hamas has been stockpiling. Aid trucks and warehouses storing supplies have often been looted. Israel accuses Hamas of stealing aid for its own fighters or to sell to finance its operations. Of course, Hamas denies these accusations. Others say the looters frequently are desperate and starving Palestinians. Hamas has established the Arrow Unit, an independent unit that operates to demonstrate Hamas's governance in the Strip through violence and presents this as dealing with local crime. The unit issued an ultimatum this week to Gazan families who looted 78 trucks. You have 10 hours to return what was stolen, said Hamas. In response, Abu Salman al-Morghani, a representative of Gazan clans, said that the clans came to form a stance to prevent the aggressors, meaning Hamas, and the thieves from stealing the food that belongs to our people, referring to the tensions between Hamas and the families and clans in the Gaza Strip. So let's turn to the region. US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, reiterated Wednesday his belief that additional countries will join the Abraham Accords. These are the agreements that normalized ties between Israel and several Muslim nations back in 2020. Witkoff said, "We think we will have some pretty big announcements on countries that are coming into the Abraham Accords. One of the president's key objectives is that the Abraham Accords be expanded and more countries come into it, and we are working on that," end quote. This week, President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer in a four-way phone call to celebrate the achievement of military goals and to discuss post-war plans for the Middle East. The Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom reports, based on accounts of sources familiar with the matter, that consensus was reached between the four on how to end the war in Gaza. The territory is to be ruled by a coalition of Arab countries, including the UAE and Egypt, the exile of Hamas from the Gaza Strip, and the release of the remaining hostages. Some countries are to accept Gaza civilians who want to leave. An agreement is also proposed on expanding the Abraham Accords to include Syria, Saudi Arabia, and other Muslim countries to normalize relations with Israel. Of course, there's a price to be paid in all of this, and perhaps not entirely unsurprisingly, Israel is to agree to a two-state solution with a reformed Palestinian Authority. But what is rather shocking is that apparently Netanyahu and Dermer may have assented to this demand, with the United States recognizing limited Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. So we're back to some kind of two-state solution. Two diplomatic sources reported that Trump put substantial pressure on Netanyahu to end the war in Gaza, this pressure existing even before Israel launched Operation Rising Lion. But of course, the pressure still remains on Israel. So we have a very interesting time ahead of us. So let us pray this week for all the people of Israel and the region. May the Lord use this period of relative respite to restore peace and stability in the land. May this be a time of healing and reconciliation for all in the land, Jews, Arabs, Bedouins, Christians, Muslims, and Druze. May all in the land look to the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for their deliverance, not to war and weapons of war. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and above all, pray for the coming of the Prince of Peace. So that's the end of today's weekly update, Friday the 27th of June. Thank you for listening. We wish you all a very blessed weekend. Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful week ahead of you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you so much, and God bless.